Hello, how are we all? This is a Q&A video today. Thanks for all your questions and comments and observations as always. A big thanks to Blipper who gave me a super thanks. So that's very much appreciated. So thank you very much for that. I've been on my travels. I've been to Seville in Spain on the road and track to ride the new KTM 990 RCR. First big launch of the year. You can read all about that in MCN, on MCN's website, and watch the video on the YouTube channel. Also been riding the CF Moto 675 SRR. Rode that earlier in the year at its Portimao launch on the track only. But this is kind of a big deep dive road test with we're weighing the bikes, we're putting them on a dyno, we're speed testing them, just really getting stuck into what makes that bike tick. And you can read all about that in the beginning of December in MCN. And I've also earlier in the week did a little bit of one-to-one tuition at Donington with Davis on his Yamaha R6. You can have a little look at the YouTube short to see how he got on. But there was a few light bulb moments there from him. Quite often it's the simple things with riding that makes the big difference. You know, it's very easy to kind of get stuck into the granular detail of riding, but there was a few kind of fundamentals there that just unlocked a load of confidence and enjoyment for Davis. Thanks as well to everyone that came to say hello on track. It's very much appreciated. Shame about the weather on the day. I think that's probably one of the last track days of the year, but they'll all kick off again next spring, I guess. So if anyone wants any one-to-one tuition, just drop us a line on Instagram. Let's get stuck into some questions, shall we? So the first one is from user GH302. Thanks for another informative video. No problem. Thanks for the question. What's so special about the Yamaha R1 that makes it your and many other journalists' favourite track bike, while it lost to European bikes in every recent Superbike group review? Yeah, very, very good question. Yamaha R1, kind of talking about the second generation and onwards, I suppose, 2015 and on. Even though the first cross-plane crank R1 was really good, and every R1's brilliant, really. It won the initial group tests when it first came out in 2015 and 16, and then it was kind of overshadowed by other bikes. The Panigale started to really take hold, especially the V4. In terms of, I suppose it depends what you're looking for, what your testing criteria is. If you're kind of looking at the R1 as an overall bike in completely standard trim, which is how we test the bikes, you test them as they come out the showroom. You can't kind of say, well, it would be better if you did X, Y, and Z. The group tests don't work like that. You kind of got to work with what you've got. So as a road bike, the R1 kind of loses it to some of its rivals like GSX-R1000s and S1000RRs because it's quite extreme on the road. I had one as a long-termer in 15. The seat's really hard, the bars are really low. So kind of as an all-round road-going superbike, it doesn't score as high as some of the others. And on the track, it loses out to the competition mainly because of its brakes, the braking feel and power, because of the ABS isn't very good compared to its rivals, and it's maybe lacking a tiny little bit of power compared to some of its real strong rivals as well. So that's why it doesn't always win group tests. But I would say if I wanted to go out and buy 1,000 now just to do track days, I'd buy an R1. For me, it's kind of like the GSX-R 750 of the superbike world. It's very easy to ride fast on track. The reason it's easy to ride fast is because of the cross-plane crank engine. Its superpower is the way it gets out of corners. It's got a lot of mechanical grip in standard trim. Very good electronics in standard trim. So you can just absolutely get on the throttle at full lean and it just grips and goes, because of the nature of the cross-plane crank layout. The anti-wheel is good, the traction control is good. It's just a very friendly, easy bike. And a lot of people, even at club racing, that have gone to R1s, their results have suddenly shot up. It's involving, I suppose, with the GSX-R 750 analogy. The GSX-R 750 is exciting because it just revs to the moon. But the great thing about the R1 is that it just sounds amazing. You know, that cross-plane crank engine, it sounds a bit like a V4. You know, that and the Aprilia RS-V4 sound quite similar. So if you were to sort the brakes out and just did a few little tweaks to the R1, I think it would probably be my ideal track bike by a long way. It's just very easy, very friendly. The other bikes are a little bit hard work. My S1000RR is fantastic, but it's a bit of an animal. Panigales are amazing, but they're demanding. But the R1's just very, very friendly. I don't know how friendly it stays when you start to tune it, but in standard trim, just with a few little chassis mods, you know, to the brakes and suspension, I think it'd be absolutely amazing. So yeah, it would be my go-to bike. But yeah, the reason it doesn't win group tests, well, it doesn't win them now because you can't buy them for the road, so we don't include them in our group tests. But it's just a little bit flawed in standard trim on the track and a little bit too uncomfortable on the road. And if I got one, I wouldn't ride it on the road anyway. It would just be track only. But very good question. Thank you very much. Next, from Cora Ozdevizoglu. Hope I didn't make a hash of your name there. Right, we're talking about tyres here, but thanks for your question. I fully understand you can't go wrong with modern tyres, but it's also hard to find one that suits your riding style or preference within the same category, even except from reading forums or trying those tyres for yourself, which is a big commitment for more than 10,000 kilometres for sports touring tyres. We'd be curious about further ways on how we can get more detailed information on the newest ones, really. Yeah, well, good question. Most questions I get on this channel are to do with tyres. Most questions I get at MCN are to do with tyres. It's a minefield. You know, there's lots of different genres of tyres, from sports touring to track day. That's before you've even talked about off-road tyres and adventure tyres. Within those genres, there's lots of different makes and models. The manufacturers find it hard to name their tyres, so it's easy to understand what they are. Some ranges are easier to understand than others. Some manufacturers keep their old tyres on their website as well as the new ones. So yeah, it's an absolute minefield. In terms of, you know, if you were to look at in any given genre of tyre, the latest generation of those tyres are all going to be really good, like you say. I think that they all suit everybody's riding style. You know, I don't think if you've got a certain riding style, you're going to favour one tyre or another. So, you know, it's just a question of, all the tyres have got very different characters. They've all got very similar grip, but they warm up faster or slower. They've got different handling characteristics. They've got different ride qualities, and everything in between. They give you different levels of confidence. So yeah, it's really hard to sort of pick out what's what. You can talk to other people, you can go on forums, people have got their favourites, but very, very few people will ever have the luxury of being able to try all the different tyres at the same time, in the same conditions, on the same bike. And when you do that, you can see the differences. So I'd say the only way you can get detailed information of what tyres are the best is to look at magazine group tests, whether it's MCN or Ride or any overseas magazines. Motorrad do really comprehensive tyre tests. That's the only way, really, you're going to get to the nub of what's what. But having said that, if you've got a favourite brand and you like their tyres, then if you pick out a sports touring tyre or a sports tyre or whatever, you're not going to be disappointed with any of them, because there are no bad tyres. There are just tyres that are better than others, but none of them are bad. In terms of sports touring tyres, the last time we tested them was a couple of years ago. So if you have a look for an old back issue of Ride magazine or MCN, if you get MCN's app, you can see all the past issues of MCN and see MCN every Wednesday as it comes out. You'll be able to find tyre comparison tests as well. So yeah, good question, but I can understand your kind of confusion when it comes to tyres. I do myself. There's certain brands I don't know what they are, but there's some that are easy to understand. But thanks for your question. Next is from Tanner Passion GP. Thanks for your question. I was at the Cremona circuit last Thursday. I've not been to that one, in Italy, with my 2012 GSX-R 750. Mine's like yours except for the clip-ons and rear sets. I have PP tuning foot pegs that are too high for my height and weight. I'm 171 centimetres and weigh 94 kilos. The stock saddle slips too much and the tank grips I fitted help, but I couldn't stay in the saddle. I continued to have my legs open when braking and I couldn't push on the footrest due to my knees being too far back and squashed together. I have to change the footrest. There are brands that produce them lower, Walter, Motor, Bonamici Racing. But not only that, I have to put on track fairings with a saddle that grips my butt and doesn't make me slide towards the tank. It was a course fortunately, but I couldn't improve anything because of those two big problems. Right, so hanging on under braking. Well, the first thing I'd say is going back to the tuition that I did at Donington the other day with Davis. He had his bike set up as he thinks he likes it, but I sat on it to do the demonstration about body position, and the pegs were so high they were just absolutely gripping him in, and he ended up with a break-in body position like you're describing. So he was so high on the pegs that when he was under brakes he was kind of sitting right back on the seat with his knees squeezed in the tank with a big gap between the tank and his crutch because he wasn't very comfortable. So we lowered the pegs and they gave him more room to move about. But fundamentally, the best way to hang on under braking, and the way you describe your body position there would kind of indicate that you're not doing this, is about body position. So it's about getting into your lower half of your body position before you start to brake. So in other words, that means you get your bum off the side of the seat, like one big bum cheek off the side of the seat, which means that when you do that, your inner thigh is pressed up against the back of the tank at almost 90 degrees, maybe 45, maybe between 45 and 90. And when it's in that position, when you start to brake, you're actually holding on with your inner thigh, and also on the side, the outside of the bike, the side you're not hanging off on, your foot position can be like flat-footed, like Charlie Chaplin, and you dig your heels into the heel plates or the frame of your bike, whatever's kind of closest to your heels. So you're really hanging on with you're digging your heels in, and you're digging your thigh into the tank, and like your inside foot is on its toes. And when you do that, you don't even need tank grips. Tank grips are helpful. They're a supplement to that for sure. But when you're hanging on with your lower half of your body like that under hard braking, you don't really need to push your arms back to hold yourself up. You can actually brake with kind of soft arms, not completely floppy arms. You still need to hold yourself up, but you don't need to lock your arms and try and stay on, and it makes you really uncomfortable and makes the bike unstable. So that would be my recommendation. Give yourself more leg room with the foot pegs, but then always get into your lower half of your body position before you brake, and then you can hang on with your thighs under braking. And that basically means that around any given track, it's important not to get back on the bike too soon out of the corner as well. So if you've got a track where you've got a right-hander, then a short straight and another right-hander, you just stay hanging off all the way between the two corners. You don't get back on the bike then off again. And if you do that, then you're keeping the bike more upright on the way out of the corner. So you can as you're throttling, you're bringing the bike up, and then when you come to brake, you're in the right body position. And most tracks on a fast bike like a GSX-R 750, you're always hanging off one way or the other. You're never actually sat in the middle of the bike, and it gives you you give yourself a lot less to do around the track. You keep the bike more stable. It's easier to hang on under braking. You give yourself more grip by hanging off, coming out of the corners. It's kind of win-win-win. So that's maybe something to try. Thanks very much for your question. Next, from Matthew Garnett 408. I need to have a question. I ride a Bandit K4 1200S. I've been given a track day as a birthday present. Very nice. Which track would be the safest for my first track day? And have you got any tips for someone on an old sports tourer? Love the vids, thanks. Well, thanks for your question. I wouldn't say there are any tracks which are kind of more dangerous than others. But I would say that if you're on a sports tourer, presumably on sports touring tyres as well, you'll have a lovely time whatever track you go to. But I would go to something that's an interesting track. Like you've got a sports tourer, do a touring kind of style track day. So the interesting tracks are kind of, the UK's got some amazing circuits, some of the woodland circuits. So if you can get to do Brands GP, which is like a mini Nürburgring, well, actually all the woodland circuits are like mini Nürburgrings. Cadwell is another one I think would be brilliant, and Alton. All the other tracks are good. Donington's really great, but it's much more open and exposed, and your sports tourer might feel a bit lost, or your Bandit might feel a bit lost around there. The same with Snetterton. Mallory might be a bit too tight. So yeah, I'd go for the woodland circuits, Brands GP, Alton or Cadwell. In terms of tips, probably two big ones really. Well, three. If it's your first time, get yourself in the novice group, obviously, and just completely take your time. You know, start off, you know, if you can get instruction when you're there from some of the like No Limits instructors or MSV instructors, that would be really good. You know, treat the first session really like a road ride, to have a look around the track and see which way it all goes. You know, if you try and go fast straight away on a track, you get tunnel vision and you perhaps don't see what shape the corners are in real life. You might think something's a right angle corner when actually it doubles back on itself. So that first session is a good kind of reconnaissance exercise to go slowly and see your way around the track. But then the two main ones is to make sure that your tyres are good. So you got, you know, they're not squared off, they're good quality tyres. You do have to drop the pressures because the heat you generate around a track will make the tyres expand, and then you'll be riding on a smaller contact patch, so you need to drop them a bit. And body position, really important. So a Bandit's not going to have a massive amount of ground clearance, so you've got to make sure that you hang off in the corners to keep the bike more upright. So you need grip and you need ground clearance. And then after that, you know, how long's a piece of string when it comes to track tips. But if you keep it simple like that, take your time, hang off a lot, make sure your tyres are good, and choose an interesting track, because you're going to be more interested in the experience than lap times. So, you know, if you're on an R1 or something, you just wanted to do fast lap times, it'd be a bit different. But to just enjoy a track, then that would be my recommendation. But perhaps you can let me know how you get on. Thanks very much. Next is from Marcus Seidel, 1857. I recognise your name. Thanks very much for all your comments on this question. I really appreciate your approach to reviewing motorcycles, specifically how you structure it as advice for a friend who asks you about the bike. Please keep up the good work. Thank you very much. I'm currently considering a few bikes myself. Ducati 959 or V2, the older or newer model, or the Yamaha R9. My main question is, which one would you recommend for my specific case? My riding is weekend blast, once a week commute to work, 3 or 4 long weekend trips a year with friends, 2 track days a year. I'm first and foremost a sports bike lover. The look and the feeling they give is for me like nothing else. That means accepting a bit of discomfort, needing to eat a bit less and to train and stay fit and flexible. I'm absolutely willing to do it. Your expertise is very valued. Thank you. Greetings from the Basque Country, Marcus. Well, good question. So, in general terms, the Ducati 959 or V2 is by far the more track focused, more stiff, more serious, gets better the harder you ride it. And the Yamaha is a little bit softer and a little bit more road bike like, although the R9 riding position isn't far off an R6. It's still quite extreme, and the Ducati is actually a little bit more spacious. So if you apply those thoughts to your criteria, which would be best for a weekend blast, I would probably say the Yamaha. Once a week commute to work, I'd say the Yamaha. 3 or 4 long weekend trips a year with friends, I'd say Yamaha. 2 track days a year, Ducati. Actually, weekend blast, probably Ducati. It's kind of 50-50 really, which you should get. I think if you love your sports bikes and you don't mind a little bit of discomfort, I think the Ducati is probably going to be more up your strata. You know, they are pure sports bikes really. You know, the Yamaha, you always feel like it's an MT-09 with a fairing, even though it's very effective, very good. Won the World Super Sport Championship, hasn't it? The Ducati feels more special, it's more premium. You know, the build quality of the Yamaha and the Ducati are the same, but you know, the Ducati is just put together with that little bit more kind of luxury. So I think on balance, if you were willing to sort of take the kind of, the Ducati is slightly awkward in road situations, you know, a little bit of a clattery engine, they run quite hot. If you were to accept those for your kind of longer rides, then I'd probably go for the Ducati. But and in terms of which one, 959, the V2, I would probably go for the last generation V2, the one that looks like a V4. I think they're absolutely fantastic. Hope that helps. Let me know how you get on. Next, from Hunt Motorcycle Tours 1090. This is an addition to another question, which I can't remember what it was, but thanks anyway. On the road, should we all just use touring tyres as we're not going fast enough? Thank you. Well, it is a really interesting question actually. Sports touring tyres now have evolved to give you the best of all worlds on all bikes, in all conditions. So you can ride them through winter. I mean, sometimes we call sports touring tyres winter tyres. They're designed to work at really low temperatures. They warm up really fast. They're very durable. They're really good in the wet. But then in the summer, the latest generation of sports touring tyres, really grippy. You can use them on track. At the Ron Haslam Race School, we used to use sports touring tyres on Fireblades and CBR 600s, even through the summer, and they're really good. So it's kind of win-win-win. You can use them for everything. It's not really a question of if we're fast enough to use them or not. They're just really great all-round tyres. The only downside with the sports touring tyre, and the reason the other tyres exist, is because they're designed to be very durable, and the way they're constructed, they don't offer the last word in grip or the last word in feel or the last word in fast steering. So if you've got an absolutely piping hot day and you've got a sports bike and you don't ride it in the winter, then I probably wouldn't put sports touring tyres on. I put good all-round sports tyres on, or kind of that middle ground between sports and track day. Things like a Dunlop Sport Smart TT or a Pirelli Diablo Rosso Corsa 4, something like that. And those tyres, even if you're not riding them fast enough, are going to give you a bit more of a bit more involvement with the bike. You know, they don't have as much beef on them, so they're lighter, so they don't wear as well. But they'll just make the bike feel a little bit more alive. You'll get more lean angle and more ultimate grip, especially if you can do a track day. But what I discovered this week, which is very interesting, on the CF Moto, and I haven't seen this on any other bike before, it's got a tyre pressure monitor system on the dash, which lots of bikes have got. It shows you tyre pressure back and front, but it's also got tyre temperature, and I've never seen that before. And on a cold day, when I rode the bike, where it's probably about 10, 11, 12 degrees, the front tyre never got above 30 degrees, and the rear tyre got up to 41 once. And it was interesting, when you're riding along in a straight line in a dual carriageway, the front tyre cools down and loses pressure because it's being blasted by the cold wind, and the rear keeps its heat because it's controlling the power. Then you start to brake hard through corners and accelerate, and the tyre temperature and pressure comes up, but not very much. Now, in a hotter conditions, and the CF Moto has got sort of all-round sports tyres, just sort of in the middle ground. So they're probably on the edge of being in their temperature window. And in the heat, you're obviously going to get more tyres, but more temperature. But when you think, for example, that a racing tyre needs at least 85 degrees in the tyre warmer to work, and then out on the track it probably needs more to work properly. When people use race tyres like scrubs on the road, they're nowhere near getting it up to temperature. So even though they're sticky tyres, they won't work as well as a sports touring tyre. And then if you kind of extrapolate that down, a track day tyre is probably not going to work at a lower temperature, and a sports tyre won't work at a lower temperature. So a sports touring tyre is going to probably be grippier than most so-called grippier tyres because of the temperature it works at. So it's really interesting. So knowing the tyre pressures gives you an indication of whether you can go for it or not, or whether you've got to keep it in your trousers. I think having a tyre temperature readout on bikes would stop a lot of cold tyre crane of curves crashes, for example. Although there's no kind of temperature on the left and the right of the tyre, it's just a generic temperature, so that wouldn't quite work. But it's an interesting, and it made me think really that, you know, for most of the time a sports or sports touring tyre is probably best for any bike. You know, unless you live in Australia and it's absolutely red hot, like Tasmania where we've been before, on trips, and the roads there are amazing and it's warm, and you scrub tyres like they've been on a track, so maybe you can get away with stickier tyres. But I thought that was very interesting. But generally sports touring tyres are brilliant. Thanks for your question. This one's from Anthony Wilson, QK6BL. Hey Neezy, I have a 23 MT09 SP. There's a lot of engine braking. I use that a lot. Is that a good way to slow down? Well, good question. Engine braking is important. So important, in fact, that a lot of modern superbikes have adjustable engine braking control, and even lesser bikes actually have adjustable braking control. It's something that's spoken a lot about in racing. So, you know, and it's also personal preference. Some people like a lot of freewheeling, like low engine braking, so it feels like a two-stroke going into the corners. Some people like a lot of engine braking, so it pulls them back. The advantage of lots of engine braking is that it does help you slow down, but there's a risk of the rear wheel locking up and clattering into corners. If you've got a lot of freewheeling, the bike goes into the corner smoothly, but the engine's not helping to slow it down. So, you know, for the road at least, you want kind of a nice middle ground. And engine braking is just another way of stopping the bike. If you use a back brake, engine braking is one of your three brakes: front brake, back brake, engine braking. And if you just use the front, it's one of your two brakes. So I wouldn't say you need a lot of engine braking on your bike. You know, the rule of thumb is on the road, you want to choose cornering gears that are nice and smooth, You don't want to be using aggressive gears, so you know, and you don't need loads of engine braking either. But if you're going through a set of like real twisty mountain roads or on track, you're going to need more engine braking. If you're too low in the gears and you're running out of revs on the way out of the corner too soon, then you know you've gone down too many gears. And if the bike just feels lazy on acceleration, then you're probably going through the corners with a bit too high a gear. But that's only when you're going for it. For normal riding, it's all about moderation. So yeah, a little bit of engine braking is a good thing, supplemented with sort of a little bit of braking. But I guess it depends on how spiritedly you're riding. But not too much, because you can get yourself into trouble with locking the wheel up. But good question, thank you very much. Great bike as well, the MT-09 SP. This one's from Dua90205. Similar subject. How do you downshift quickly under braking on a bike with no quick shifter? My SV650 doesn't have a slipper clutch either, so it always feels awkward when I want to downshift quickly. Can you just dump the clutch if the bike has a slipper clutch? Also, a separate question, what's your recommendation if one wants to get into motorcycle journalism? Seems like all the top YouTube guys like you, Chris, Adam and Al have raced professionally before. Is it necessary for one to have raced to understand what's up with a bike? I really appreciate all your Q&As and reviews. Love from China. Wow, it's a long way. Thank you very much. Great questions. How do you downshift quickly under braking with a bike with no quick shifter? Well, you need to rev match. You need to blip the throttle in between gear changes to keep the revs up, to stop the rear wheel from locking. Your bike doesn't have a slipper clutch. It always feels awkward when I want to downshift quickly. So you've got to, you know, again, it depends how spiritedly you're riding, but you need to rev match as you change down through the gears, and you need to do that gently, especially on a twin cylinder, because it's really easy to lock the wheel up. If you've got a slipper clutch, you can't really just dump the clutch. Theoretically you can, but there's a reason why. If you've got a bike with all the bells and whistles, you'll have a slipper clutch. You'll also have an auto blipper. You'll also have engine braking control. So you need all of those things working really in conjunction to be able to change down smoothly and keep the bike stable going into the corner. So I'd say even if you've got a slipper clutch, you'd still need to rev match as you go down through the gears. I wouldn't just dump the clutch. Unless you've got the slipper clutch set up so it really does freewheel like a two-stroke, and you could perhaps bang, 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 bang down through the gears, but I wouldn't really recommend that on a twin on the road anyway. So yeah, just learn how to rev match. And then in terms of getting into motorcycle journalism, so you mentioned us lot who have done lots of racing before. I don't think any of us has raced professionally. We're all kind of amateur racers, club racers. Chad's obviously done road racing as well at the TT. Oh, as has Al Fagan as well. I would say the best way to get into motorcycle journalism, you don't need to be racer level to be able to review a bike. You just need to have enough brain space left over when you're riding to be able to feel what the bike's doing. So you need to be able to ride to a decent level. But the most important aspect of being a motorcycle journalist in the traditional kind of print media anyway is the writing. The writing's a lot more important than the riding. You know, like I say, you need to be a decent level rider to be able to review bikes well. You need a lot of experience, so you need to be able to draw on the experience of riding lots of other bikes, but that only happens over time. You can't magic that experience. But the writing's a big one. You know, when we've advertised for jobs at MCN, you get loads and loads of people who are really good on camera, who are good riders, who look good in pictures, but really, you know, even like Chris, Al, Chad, they've all come from a kind of a print media, proper journalism background, and that really helps as well. And it helps being able to structure videos as well. So the writing's the most important thing. So if you really were serious about getting into motorcycle journalism, then I would look into actual news journalism or feature writing or something like that first to brush up your skills before you want to become a motorcycle journalist. I'd love to know actually what the motorcycle media is like in China. Are there lots of bike magazines, or is it mainly online? Yeah, you have to let us know. But it's very hard to get into motorcycle journalism nowadays, and it's changed a lot now, hasn't it? You know, there's many more YouTubers, there's many more influencers. So maybe, you know, you could get into it that way rather than the traditional way. But yeah, you don't need to be racer level to be able to test a bike. You just need a bit of experience and a decent bit of riding ability. But great question. Thank you very much. Good luck with the rev matching. Right, this one's from Keyboard Rossi. Hey Neezy, to your knowledge, do manufacturers ever change the gearing and geometry setup for their new bikes when they do track launches? I remember when the last generation of R1s came out a few years ago, one of the journalists, can't remember who, was saying that the R1M was geared shorter than the base R1. I do remember that they fitted VO2s on the M and R11s on the base model. I get better tyres and gearing to make the M stand out as a premium version, but I think it does a disservice when journalists want to compare the two bikes to find out how much better the premium components like the suspension are. Good question. Right, thank you very much. In terms of manufacturers changing gearing and geometry setup, that I can't remember, it was the 2020 R1 and that was at Jerez. So we rode the standard R1 and the R1M. I can't remember the gearing being changed. In terms of geometry, I would say that a lot of manufacturers would adjust the suspension for the launch bikes if it's on track to suit the track and to suit the tyres, just to show them off in their best light. Although that doesn't happen as much nowadays with electronic suspension, quite often when we turn up at a track launch, the bikes start off standard and we'll get the chance to set them up if we want. So they normally start at a pretty base level. I mean, none of them are ever trying to pull the wool over our eyes, put it that way. Back in the day, when track launches, you know, of like in the noughties, as far back as I go, and since then, you'd have manufacturers put in spacers in the rear shock to increase the rear ride height to make the bike steer faster. That was quite a common trick. So yeah, mainly the bikes are, I mean, you never know. These are always pre-production bikes, launch bikes. They might have blueprinted suspension, they might have different gearing. You just wouldn't know. You just wouldn't know. They might have special tyres, you wouldn't know. So you kind of got to give them the benefit of the doubt. And to be honest, there's never a bike that you ride where that's that much different when you test it again in the UK. Obviously the bikes are as good as they can be in a launch scenario because the manufacturers want to show the bikes off to their best light. But there's no kind of real smoke and mirrors there. In terms of the two R1s, I mean, the situation is a very rare one when a manufacturer launches two versions of the same bike, one kind of premium and one kind of base model, but it does happen. Yeah, I remember there were different tyres on both the bikes. So I think they both came on Bridgestone RS11s as standard, but Yamaha chose to put the standard bike on R11s, which are their track day tyre. No, their race compound tyre. The RS11s, the track day tyre. So that would be equivalent to a supercourse or whatever. And then they put the R1M on VO2 slicks. And I think rather than them trying to kind of disguise the performance between the two bikes, I think they just wanted to show each bike off in their best light. So, you know, because the R1M is the kind of the full balls out kind of track bike, they put us on slicks. And then the standard bike, the spec wasn't so high. I mean, to be honest, there's not really a lot of difference between the two bikes anyway. The engines are the same, the brakes are the same. You do feel a little bit more plushness with the Öhlins, you know, regardless of tyres or whatever, you can feel the difference. but again, not so much with the track, because one of the good things about Öhlins electronic suspension is the ride quality and its ability to be able to change as it rides along. So on the road, you probably would have seen a big difference, because you'd always have the perfect suspension setup with electronic suspension, where you wouldn't with the standard bike with its kind of mechanically adjustable stuff. And the standard bike would have felt stiffer because it has to deal with every scenario. And electronic suspension bikes generally always feel softer, because they can be soft until they need to be stiff under hard braking or acceleration. So I think in that case, Yamaha were just trying to show the bikes off to their best ability, and give the journalists sort of the best experience. And it was lovely riding the R1M around Jerez on slicks. But yeah, I don't really think, and nowadays track launches are so few and far between, that doesn't really happen anyway. And also the bikes are at such a high level. I mean, can you imagine the new Ducati Panigale V2 if they try to tweak that to make it even better? We wouldn't even notice, because it'd be at such a high level anyway. So, but good question, good observation. Thank you very much. And finally, from Andy MF150, hey Neezy, you've become the go-to watch for me when I'm doing the Sunday chores over here on the west coast of Canada. Hello over there. I ride another SV, SV650S second gen. I love it. Good bikes. Just ask Smufka. I've been riding for about a year and a bit. My commute is about an hour each way, mostly highways, but with some twisty stuff closer to work. On my way home a few weeks ago, I was taking a tight 90-degree right-hander at a junction. So no issues at all normally, but this time there was gravel. I had a bit of a wobble, but was good, didn't go down, and a lesson learnt about gravel. But it got me thinking about comfort and experience. I find the SV650S a little awkward sometimes at slow speed. I think it's because it has clip-ons, but otherwise it's the same as a naked. I was thinking I might have had less of a wobble if I was on a naked bike as opposed to a sports style. Do you ever feel like that? And a bit of a cheeky second question, you don't need to name and shame here, but have you or any of your road testers go to events ever drop bikes at low speed? Well, thanks very much for your question, all the way over there in Canada. I would say that the little wobble you had on gravel would have happened whether you've got a sports bike or a naked bike or adventure bike or anything in between. Sports bikes aren't more disposed to being unstable in those conditions. If you hit gravel, you hit gravel. But generally, a more upright bike with straight bars is easier to control. I mean, if you hit gravel, it's generally luck anyway. You know, you're in and out of the gravel before you've had time to react, really. So, yeah, it wouldn't really make any difference if you had clip-ons or straight bars. But in general terms, riding a bike with straight bars on the road is a nicer experience, I find personally, because you've got more room to move around. You've got more vision because you're not right down on your hands, sort of in a crunched up position where it's hard to see over your shoulders. And generally you've got more leverage going through corners under braking. It's more comfortable. Where clip-ons really come into their own is when you're riding in a more sporty manner. So you can get more weight over the front of the bike, and when you get more weight over the front of the bike, because you're low on clip-ons, you put more pressure on the front tyre, so you've got more grip, and then you feel more grip coming up through the tyre and the fork legs and through your handlebars, and you can feel what's going on. And then when you're coming out of the corners, the bike's more stable because you're over the front of it. When you're going fast in a straight line, it's less likely to weave. Like big super nakeds, they weave when they go really fast because you're set up like a sail and the wind gets under the front wheel and it weaves. So in terms of kind of stability and sportiness at speed, clip-ons are definitely good. But I'd say for kind of general street riding, then straight bars are better, more upright bikes. But yeah, straight bars, clip-ons wouldn't have stopped your gravel wobble. And in terms of your second question, do any road testers at events drop bikes at low speed? Very, very rarely. I think I might have seen it once or twice where you maybe lose your footing when you're doing a U-turn. I remember seeing once, God, it was ages ago, the Buell Ulysses, or Buell Useless as we used to call it, was a really, really tall bike. And I remember that we were doing our photos. So when we do photo shoots at launches, we all queue up on the side of the road, maybe 5-10 people. And then we go off one by one, past the photographer, and then queue up down the road. And then we go back and forth past the photographer maybe 3 or 4 times. And on this occasion, where we were queuing up on the side of the side of the road really cambered off into the gutter, really kind of severely. And there was a high curb next to it. And the person that pulled up behind me went to put their foot down and kind of didn't feel any ground under their foot, and they just toppled over. But it's very, very rare. It's very rare. I mean, all the full-time road testers that you'll see at a launch and kind of the, you know, the real established YouTubers, their riding level is really high. You know, generally, you know, I'd say most road testers easily fast group pace in a track day, and a lot of them race as well, of course. So yeah, if any little spills like that happen, very, very, very rare. But accidents do happen, don't they? So last time I had a really silly low speed thing like that was a few years ago. I was on the Editor's Multistrada V4 Rally, and I was riding off a curb into some gravel on a bit of off-road, and the front tucked immediately, and at walking pace I managed to stop it, but the bike had started to lean over and I just couldn't hold it up anymore. So, and it just kind of scuffed the ground a little bit, but that was literally at 0 mile an hour. So yeah, when bikes want to go, they want to go. There's not a lot you can do about it. But yeah, we're all infallible. But thanks very much for your question. That's it for this week's Q&A. Thanks very much for watching. Next week, I've got a nice, tasty little what makes this bike great for you. So stay tuned for that one, and I'll see you soon.